Okay, so the British television world is, and it has some similarities to ours, but it also has some distinct differences, and I think it's very instructive to what we're doing here in the studying of modern Britain. So in the U.S., we have the big three networks: NBC, CBS, ABC, and they all have popular programs, dramas, game shows, competition shows like dancing or singing, and they also have each has a news division, and that some over time that's just developed into sort of a balance. And in some ways, the BBC is like that. They produce a lot of the popular, well made programming in the UK, but also have a very strong news division. Now, they got their start, as we previously mentioned, around the World Wars in radio. Radio was developing, and they started building out the BBC as the way that people got their news during wartime, and over time it became more and more of a public service, and that would get built out. And so today, if you're driving your car in the UK, you'll scan through the radio and you'll get BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three. I forget how many there are. Each one has a specific schedule and a sort of a focus. So some is more well, they just have different types of programming that appeal to different people, and you can go to different channels for that. So the television develops similarly. So today you'll have BBC One, BBC Two, I think BBC Three is the extent of it on the television side, and they'll have a lot of their lead programs on one, and other more entertainment on two, and different things like that. And so you end up with this public focused entertainment and news organization, but it's funded by taxes, which is different from the US, which is all advertising. And so with the taxes, everybody pays the same fee in the UK, and that gives you access to receiving the BBC in your home. And you also get, I believe, all UK citizens are allowed to stream access now through the BBC app. And so you end up with, everybody connected to this particular source of entertainment, which is, somewhat unique. And on the BBC News side, in a lot of ways, they're the standard bearer for news in the English-speaking world outside of the U.S. In the U.S., if you go to the airport, you look at the televisions, it's likely going to be on CNN. That's just become sort of the standard way that things are done in the U.S. And outside the U.S., if you go to an airport or a hotel and you turn on a news station, it's probably going to be BBC. They're just the accepted focal point for news in the English-speaking world outside the U.S. They also give you, if you follow their YouTube channel, so if you just like following news, follow their news channel on YouTube, you get a lot of stories that you might not see otherwise. They just cover different things. People in the U.S. tend to be concerned about things that the U.S. is involved in, and just random things around the world aren't as much of interest. And so that's what our news organizations tend to cover. And this can provide a bit of a more of a broad perspective. So if you want to, you can check out the clip here from the BBC, just as a sense. You can pay attention for different ways that they cover things that are of interest. Another area that the BBC and the UK in general, but BBC in particular, succeeds in is documentaries on all sorts of topics, history topics, sort of human story topics, and also wildlife has been one of their strong points through the years. So you may have, even if you haven't seen it, you might be aware of the Planet Earth series. I believe it was on Netflix, but it's pretty easily accessible through, I'm not sure where at the moment, but you can take a look at it. And it's just some really amazing videography and patience that went into producing these this nature. Sorry about that. Nature documentaries, and so you can see a sample in the video here. And the most famous of science communicators in the UK is David Attenborough. He is very well known in that world as a voiceover person for science productions, and it's just sort of the accepted voice. And so if you watch Planet Earth, he narrates it. If you watch it, you'll hear the voice and know that was him. Random fact is that David Attenborough's brother is I forget, I don't know if he's passed or not, but his brother played the wealthy dinosaur enthusiast who in the very first Jurassic Park movie. So the guy who spared no expense in the white outfit with a cane that had the mosquito encased in amber at the top. That's the brother of this guy. So just random connection there in the family, but it's kind of fun. So check out those videos. You'll get a sense of one of the great strengths of the BBC and the UK productions in general. Period pieces are also very much in the wheelhouse of the UK. There's a whole industry around period piece dramas, and so you'll see actors who kind of specialize in that type of entertainment pop up in different series, and so it becomes not really a joke, but just like a familiarity that people appreciate that certain actors are involved in various pieces that one after another. Oh, sorry, I keep hitting that always. But what they're doing is exploring the past. So we have period dramas in the U.S. It's just that our history isn't quite as long, and so we get period pieces that maybe deal with the Civil War, or maybe you'll get something like Mad Men, focusing on the I believe it's mostly in the 60s there. But yeah, those are our period pieces, and Britain has a little bit more history to dive into. So one of the most famous, probably the most famous in recent years, is Downton Abbey, which you're obviously familiar with. That is a period piece that's specifically focused, but there's any number of others that have been developed over the years, and they sort of get updated for each new generation. So every 20 years or so, you might get another version of something like Downton Abbey that pops up. This one in particular just hit all the right notes and became mega popular, but they're constantly producing these. This was actually ITV. There's another channel in Britain that's actually ad supported that produced Downton Abbey, but there's many others. This is a version of Oliver Twist here that was an updated version, but those are very common. Another area that they succeed well in is comedy. Now, British comedy has sort of a very specific style about it, and if you become familiar with it over time, it's pretty enjoyable. It's just one of those things where, to a non-British audience, if just a random person watches a funny, British comedy show, it seems rather strange. People are just a bit put off by it in some ways. I always like to think of it as maybe their comedy tends to be really highbrow or really lowbrow, and on the verge of absurd, or it's super wordplay and like cerebral in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's a great description for it, but a great example from years past, the team that produced Monty Python's Flying Circus, which was a television series, was quite hilarious. They would end up producing the movie Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, so you may or may not have seen that. But that is just right there in the wheelhouse of British comedy. And so this is um, a collection of some of the best moments in the Monty Python show, which gives you a little bit of a sense of British comedy. But again, as with any type of comedy, it's a little bit difficult to define. Stephen Fry is it's hard to describe what he is. He's an actor, but he's also sort of a person who writes occasionally and but also narrates things, and he's just a well thought of person in the British arts and entertainment world, and he's also a rather thoughtful person. And so he was interviewed one time about British comedy and did a pretty good job there of just trying to describe what British comedy is. And so you can check that out. I think that's it's worth your time and quite funny in its own right. This is an export, very much an export that is popular the world over throughout the English-speaking world. Really is Doctor Who, and you may not be familiar with it all, or you may be overly familiar with it, depending on your level of nerdiness, maybe. I'm not exactly sure. But this is one of those shows that started in the 1960s, and the overall idea is that this alien known as the Doctor is sort of has taken it upon himself to watch over and protect the Earth from various villainous alien things that might ruin the Earth's day. And it also goes off into space and has various adventures, and it gets updated for each generation, and each Doctor regenerates whenever that particular actor chooses to move on or they want to move in a different direction. So I think I wrote this. I made this slide when there was 12 Doctors. I think they're on 13 now. I'd have to double check. It's hard to keep up with after a while. I stopped watching it a little while back, but whenever somebody gets into this show, everybody has their Doctor, and so I found the show about the time that Matt Smith was the Doctor. Went back and watched the previous Doctor and hadn't really kept up with it much since, but it's really, really fascinating show just because you see societal trends and clothing styles and everything change with each successive generation. So it's kind of a time capsule at the same time, and so it's a good bit of fun. The Craig Ferguson, when he was doing a late show in the U.S., did I don't know if I have the video for that here. He did sort of a song about it. I have to see if I can post that video. And this is a video that explains it here in sort of a short version, maybe better than I could as well. But it's extremely popular with those in the know who know about it. And in the U.S. and the rest of the sort of English-speaking world, there are pockets of folks that love Doctor Who. So it's worth you knowing about. This is another one. I think in the one of the most successful BBC exports in recent years is Top Gear. It's they call it in the UK, they would call it a motoring show. Years past, you would have very dull shows that would talk about various models of cars. This one took a much more entertainment approach, and it's one of those, if you know about it, you know about it. And it's just a lot of fun. Three somewhat middle-aged fellows getting into trouble and causing all sorts of havoc. There was a bit of a falling out at the BBC with one of the presenters, and so these three actually moved over to Amazon Prime and produced a show there called oh, it's left me. I'd have to pull it back up. But anyway, it's good. It's doing their thing there. There's a new team that does this. But if you're into automobiles and all sorts of fun things, you can check out these two videos as some examples of what they've gotten up to over the years. So we'll pause there and continue on here in a minute.